In the name of God, the compassionate and merciful, hello everybody, hope you are doing great. You're watching FOADEBATE. Today, I have the honor of speaking with Scott Ritter, a renowned military and political analyst and author. He's well known for his views on military policies and his analysis of global conflict. Today, we will discuss forecasts regarding future conflicts and the role of the United States in this context. Mr. Ritter, thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
Thank you very much for having me.
You're welcome. Given the recent geopolitical changes, particularly regarding the competition among great powers, what predictions do you have about the nature and form of future conflicts? Do you believe that these conflicts will be primarily military in nature, or will economic and cyber dimensions also play significant roles?
Well, first of all, I think we need to understand that when we speak about the transition of power and such, there's no doubt that the United States operates in a geopolitical climate that's far different than that which it has been operating in for the past, several decades since the end of the Second World War. But Rome didn't fall overnight, and people need to understand that the United States is still the most powerful nation in the world. We have the most powerful economy, we have the most powerful military, and we have a political system that is geared towards projecting this power globally. There's no other nation in the planet or combination of nations in the planet that can project power like the United States can. And so the notion that that the United States is going away, I think, is a flawed concept. The United States is going to be around for some time, and we will be the global hegemon for a number of years to come. But the reality is we are no longer the sole remaining superpower that status we enjoyed at the end of the Cold War. Today, we have China, which economically is easily our equal, and in many cases are superior. China is a nation that's investing heavily in its military infrastructure. And although it's not yet up to the standard of the United States, it's making great strides, and very shortly it will match, and unless the United States does something, will surpass the United States in many capabilities. Russia, while it's not effective in projecting power, Russia is very likely the dominant military power in the world today in terms of genuine military capability. And from the American perspective, seeing as we have had a strategy of picking at the periphery of Russia for many decades, this strategy will no longer be effective because the Russian military has shown itself in Ukraine to be more than capable of dealing not only with the proxy armies, but also proxy armies backed by the sustained support of the collective West. And so these are new realities. And because Russia and China are military powers that the United States can't just push over, it means that it's highly unlikely that there's going to be a direct conflict, military conflict between the United States and either Russia or China. And so what we'll be looking at are military conflicts on the periphery, of where the United States will, pick areas of interest, and promote conflict there. We've seen this, for instance, in the Southern Caucasus, where the United States uses Armenia, Azerbaijan. We attempted to use Georgia. Now that Iran has aligned itself decisively with Russia and China, Iran now is vulnerable to this kind of activity. I think we'll be seeing a lot of this, potentially play out. The other area, though, that I think we will see more of is economic warfare, not just traditional trade warfare, but the kind of hybrid conflict, for instance, that we're seeing today between Ukraine and Russia, the energy wars, where energy infrastructure is being struck by drones. Iran has shown, together with Yemen, the vulnerability of Saudi oil infrastructure to these kind of drone attacks. And I think this is a new reality where state actors will be able to disguise themselves as non-state actors and use drone technology to strike critical energy infrastructure. We see underwater drones being used to hunt down Russia's shadow fleet increasingly. And so this is an area where, we can see, military style conflict that's leached into, economic, the economic sphere. And then I think also we're going to have to look at, just the sheer geopolitics of this new reality. This isn't a world where the G7 rules supreme. That used to be the world where the G7 got together and sort of carved up the world. And the G7 in its hubris and arrogance created the G20 to give the global South a feel as if it was part of the team, but really simply taking direction from the G7 to do that which the G7 was instructing them to do, always encumbered by the rules-based international order, the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, these structures of control that the United States had imposed on the world. Today, there are options. There is the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. There is BRICS, which is emerging as a very powerful entity. And we see this. The United States has said that it wants to take BRICS down, and we've threatened secondary sanctions against India and China and any nation that, buys oil from Russia. And yet this week, Vladimir Putin is going to be in India, where I believe they will sign major energy deals and major arms deals, proof positive that the threat of American secondary sanctions doesn't have the same weight that it used to have. And I think we're seeing a restructuring of the geopolitical, balance of power, where it used to be overwhelmingly under the control of the United States hegemon. Today, we're seeing geopolitical power equally divided. And actually, as the years go on, we're going to see the balance shift towards BRICS, where BRICS will accumulate the majority of the geopolitical strength. And this translates not only into economic realities, supply chains, trade relationships, but also it has gravitas in the United Nations, where the General Assembly now will not be silent. So we are seeing a world in transition, and it's going to be up to the United States to decide how violent this transition will be. United States has not shown itself to be a mature nation when it comes to dealing with challenges of the type that it's facing. We tend to go to the gun very quickly, as opposed to trying to work things out diplomatically and economically. But going to the gun isn't going to be the best option going forward. And the United States is going to have to learn how to play well with others, so to speak.
Yeah, right. In current context, the United States, as from your perspective as a global power, from my perspective as a declining global power, faced numerous challenges. Do you think the U.S. can effectively use diplomacy to manage tensions, or will military interventions continue to be part of its strategies?
Look, when the mantra of the Trump administration is peace through strength, when they changed the Ministry of Defense, or the Secretary Department of Defense, into the Department of War, I think you answered your question. Yeah. We don't know anything but brute power, brute force, and we'll continue to rely upon the military arm as our premier method of pressuring the world to do what we want. But again, we're going to start getting pushback from Russia and China and other nations as well. Iran is not a pushover. India is not necessarily a stooge of the West. And I think we're going to see that politically, it's very difficult for the United States to continue to be involved in forever wars. Even the Trump administration says that this is not what it wants, and the American people don't want it either. And it's going to be very difficult politically for the United States to become engaged in the kind of military adventures that have dominated American foreign policy for the past century or so. we're going to have to learn how to, as I said earlier, play well with others. We're going to have to learn the art of diplomacy. And we're also going to have to learn that just as in the case of military, where there's sufficient power to push back economically, the world isn't going to, give in to American sanctions. That weapon has been blunted. We're going to have to learn how to negotiate in good faith. Right now you see the Trump administration. We don't negotiate in good faith. We come in and threaten overwhelming sanctions, and then we back down and pretend that there's some sort of victory. I don't know how the rest of the world sees this. To me, it seems very childlike. It's childlike behavior. It's a lot of posturing in front of a mirror, flexing to make, America believe in itself. But I think the world looks at us, and instead of seeing some Arnold Schwarzenegger type figure, they just see an old fat man who hasn't been to the gym in many years trying to impress people with a body that no longer impresses. The United States needs to grow up and mature, and that's one of our greatest challenges we have. You see it in our Congress. Our Congress doesn't know how to act with the rest of the world. We have congressmen and senators who speak as if they are, the global government, as if they can dictate to the world how things are done. They're so out of touch with reality. It's not even funny anymore. I'm scared when I travel the world to see America through the eyes of the world, because we're not what we used to be. It used to be when people looked at America, you saw this nation that was not perfect, but was trying, this nation that was proud, that's strong, this shining city on the hill. And today, we're just a bunch of buffoons who are blustering and threatening, and it's not too impressive.
Exactly. As a military analyst, what signs do you currently see that might indicate an increase in tensions and conflict in the future? Can you point some specific issues that should be closely monitored?
Well, first of all, I think we need to understand that the United States recognizes that it can no longer serve as the global policeman. And you're seeing increasing efforts to disentangle ourselves from European commitments, from Middle Eastern entanglements, even from the Pacific. And there's more and more talk about creating a fortress America in the Western Hemisphere, where the United States will enforce a Monroe Doctrine 2.0 to keep the rest of the world out of South America, Central America, to impose our will on the rest of North America. This is the direction we're going. So I think you're going to be seeing a lot of American muscle flexing, in Central America, in South America. Look at what we're doing with Venezuela right now, and look what Trump just did over the last couple of days with Honduras, putting our thumb on the electoral scale there. I think you're going to see us putting pressure on Mexico, on Cuba. We're going to try and lock up the Western Hemisphere. This is where I think the greatest potential of, real military action will be. We don't want a war in Europe, and we're doing our best to get out of that, to prevent a larger conflict in Ukraine and to make Europe stand on its own 2 feet. Over the last several decades, Europe has become accustomed to having the American bully behind it. So they've, gone out there and got in the face of nations like Russia. That's over. I think Europe's going to have to learn its place and calm down. The same thing in the Middle East. Yes, we back Israel, 100%, but we're looking for solutions now, not just a continuation of the status quo. We're looking to resolve issues. I don't know if we found the solution yet, but our goal is not to be involved in the forever wars of the Middle East. And so I think that even though there's still a great risk of conflict with Iran, I think that the United States, especially under Trump, is looking for ways to avoid large-scale conflict in the Middle East. And then in the Pacific, we just don't want to have a war with China. I think you're seeing the United States become very realistic about Taiwan and the prospects for Taiwan going forward. Our goal now should be to avoid creating a situation where China feels the need to militarily intervene in Taiwan, and instead to work toward a situation where, Taiwan can, maintain a modicum of independence, but still interact with China in a meaningful way. We also, I think, need to not just avoid war with China, but also avoid a trade war with China. We need to better work with China's global economy to the benefit of the United States. So I think you're seeing a trend globally where the United States is seeking to de-emphasize the military solution. But in the Western Hemisphere, I think it's the Monroe Doctrine 2.0, and I think you're going to see a lot more muscle flexing in the Western Hemisphere in the years to come.
What about the role of actually, better to say that, what role do you see for the United States regarding the issue of Palestine, or even the war between the Israeli regime and Iran? What do you think about it?
Look, the Palestinian issue is an extraordinarily complex issue, and it has not been resolved as we speak. There are still, many problems, and some of the biggest problems reside within Israel itself. And I think there's a growing recognition in the United States that this isn't just about getting the Arab world to bend its knee to Israel, but to get Israel to make meaningful changes inside of Israel, to break away from this greater Israel dynamic. And the Abrams Accords has, yes, on the one hand, it reinforces a greater Israel dynamic, but on the other hand, it creates a vehicle for, economic collaboration, for peaceful coexistence. And I think that's the priority the United States wants going forward. I think there's a widespread recognition that we simply lack the capacity to, do to Iran what we did to Iraq, regime change, occupation, etc. We're going to have to learn to get along with the Iranians. The nuclear issue is, of course, a big issue. I don't know what the solution for that is either, but I do believe fundamentally that the United States is not looking for a war with Iran, that we're looking for a diplomatic solution. We're looking for Iran and Israel to, find a way to peacefully coexist. Of course, I think that's contingent upon a Palestinian solution. It's very troubled waters, but I do believe the intent of the captain is to sail the ship through these waters, not to get, not allow the ship to flounder in the turbulence. Okay.
Considering the history of U.S. military intervention in the West Asian region and other parts of the world that you know better than me, what key lessons can be learned from the experiences to avoid repeating past mistakes?
Well, I think the one thing that, the one lesson that should be apparent to all is that, we can't judge ourselves based upon the tactical successes of the U.S. military. I don't mean to offend anybody, but there's nobody who can defeat the United States Marine Corps in a head-to-head fight. We're just that good. But that doesn't win a war. We can go around and beat people in every battle we fight, but we still lose the war. Look at Afghanistan. I mean, the Taliban was defeated. The Taliban could not beat us, but we left because war is not just seen as a military-only phenomenon. War is an extension of politics by other means. And in the Middle East, the United States doesn't have the political acumen to transform military victory into political victory. We begin these military adventures on a foundation of ignorance about the reality of the Middle East. We're seeking to solve problems that we haven't adequately defined. I've always said that you can't solve a problem unless you first properly define what the problem is. Because if you don't define it properly, whatever it is you think you're solving isn't solving the problem. And this is the history of the United States in the Middle East. We come in, we deploy military forces, we bomb, we occupy, we kill, thinking that we're solving a problem, but we're not. We're just making the problem even worse. And ultimately, politically, we end up being defeated. And I think this holds for every problem set in the Middle East. And the fundamental lesson here is that the United States needs to, have a top to bottom rethink of what our Middle Eastern strategy is. What do we want from the Middle East? And in order to do that, we have to spend more time listening to the people who live in the Middle East and less time listening to the so-called experts who populate Washington, D.C. if we would listen to the Iranians, I've been to Iran, they don't want war with the United States. The Iranians want what every nation wants: stability, security, the security that comes from stability. They're not looking for a war with anybody, even Israel. They would prefer to find a way out of this problem that doesn't require military action, because military action doesn't solve anything. Yes, you get the pleasing moment of watching an Iranian missile strike Israel. Yay! But you also pay the price, because you're getting your own sites blown up. And you have economic sanctions. Your economy's not functioning the way it needs to function. That's not good for Iran. Not in the short term, not in the long term. If we would listen to the Iranians, we would understand that they want what we want in many cases. We just need to work with them to make sure that all of the shareholders, their voices are heard. If we would trade with the Iranians on an equitable basis, it would flourish. Iran would flourish. The region would flourish. Iran has so much potential, especially in Central Asia right now. That Iran has made this pivot to the east. The potential of Iran to be a big player in Central Asia, to be a big part of this Eurasian economic union that Russia's trying to push, is real. But they can't do it if America continues to strangle them and threaten them with secondary sanctions. So the United States, I think, needs to stop telling people what to do and start listening to people about what needs to be done. And if that can happen, I don't see a problem. It's going to require the United States to recognize that the day of the American hegemon is over, and it's time for us to stop pretending we know best. It's time for us to sit down and talk to people and listen to them and work together in a collegial fashion to solve these problems.
So you believe in that?
The reason why I believe that this is the case is because the military option just isn't viable anymore. And if we can't go to the gun, we're going to have to re-educate ourselves. I mean, Americans aren't stupid. We're actually pretty smart. We're simple, but we're actually pretty smart. And when we're confronted with complex problems, we do have the capacity to solve these problems if we just take the time to learn what it is we're trying to solve. The biggest problem for America is that for too long we've accomplished everything through brute force. We just threaten you with violence, and that's the way. We can't do that anymore. And because we can't do that anymore, we're going to have to learn a better way to operate. So I have faith.
So actually, you believe that the U.S. won't wage war in the region, right?
I don't believe the United States. It's not that we don't want to wage war. Of course we want to. That's America. We're America. It's our go-to option. We can't wage war anymore.
You can't.
We don't have the capacity to do this. In 1990, 1991, we deployed 750,000 American forces into the Middle East to fight Iraq during Operation Desert Storm. In 2003, we brought in a little over 200,000 troops to carry out Operation Iraqi Freedom. We brought in 100,000 troops into Afghanistan. Today, we don't have that capacity. We don't have the ability to rapidly mobilize these forces. We don't have the amphibious support. We don't have the logistical support. For the United States to wage a large-scale ground action in the Middle East right now, we would have to do a total mobilization of our nation, which is politically impossible to accomplish. So we want to fight you. We want to bomb you. We want to blow things up. But it's increasingly becoming obvious that that's not going to solve the problem. And so we will have to learn how to do something different.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for your time. In conclusion, if you feel there is any point I missed in our discussion, I'm all ears.
No, you did a great job. I think we took a nice tour around the world, and hopefully this conversation has shed some light on the new realities that the United States has to confront geopolitically.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate your valuable insight and time. We hope to benefit from your experiences and knowledge in future as well.
Okay, well, I look forward to having additional
promise me?
conversations with you.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Have a great time. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye-bye.